Thank you everybody for joining us for Ed Kabotie's talk this evening, An Alternative History of America. This is presented on behalf of Friends of Cedar Mesa, the Bears Ears Education Center, and the Four Corner Lecture Series. The Four Corner Lecture Series has been running for a number of years and is a collaboration of a number of organizations in the Four Corner region, just presenting about different natural and cultural resources in the communities of the plateau. But Friends of Cedar Mesa is a bluff-based nonprofit organization working to protect the cultural and natural resources of San Juan County. And the Bears Ears Education Center was opened in September of 2018 with the intention of teaching people how to visit with respect, essentially. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. And just bear with me here. So, with no further ado, Ed, we're so excited to have you. Thanks for being here.
Cool, thank you so much. Miagindi navikemaing, Ohuape Ngangumu, Lentawian Hopi Matsiwa. My name is Ed Kabotie. I'm from the Hopi village of Songopave and also the Tewa village of Kapo'owinge, otherwise known as Santa Clara Pueblo. I'll be sharing some artwork from my family, including myself, my father, and my grandfather, to present an alternative history of America. And actually a better name for this presentation takes place if you hyphenate the word alternative, then you get an alternative history of America. Okay, very good. So this first slide is a piece of art from myself that I refer to as True American. And you can see the coyote there. And this is really kind of a foundational introduction to what I'm going to be talking about today. You can see that this piece is built around the theme of the American flag. But what you see here is 7 stripes rather than 13. And this is because much of what I'm going to say this evening is going to be focused on the Puebloan people of the Four Corners area. I'll be talking about a general history of Native people, but it will tend to be a little more specific about the Puebloan nations, both ancestral and contemporary, and maybe even more particular slant on Hopi on one side, which is my father's people, and then my mother's people, the Tewa. So the 7 stripes in this flag, what they represent are the 7 nations of the Puebloan people. So this is the Tiwa, the Tewa, the Toa, Kiris, Hopi, Zuni, and also the Piro Tampiro people that still exist today, but are unrecognized, federally unrecognized tribes. Up in the top corner, you'll see the single star surrounded by the 4 stars. And this is representative to me of the Colorado Plateau, the 4 sacred mountains of the plateau: Navajo Mountain, San Francisco Peaks, Mount Hesperus or Mount Blanca in Colorado, and then in New Mexico, Mount Taylor. So this landscape that I refer to as the Colorado Plateau, sometimes I feel like it needs a little bit of an explanation, maybe not for some of our listening audience, but I think I should still explain it. So when you drive outside of Phoenix, when you drive north from the Phoenix Valley, you climb up onto a gigantic mesa that we refer to as the Colorado Plateau. It's called the Colorado Plateau because of the presence of red, the color of rojo, the Colorado Plateau, the red plateau. All throughout this landscape, you have beautiful red colored rock featured all throughout the plateau. And this giant mesa extends north of Phoenix all the way up to about 2/3 of the state of Utah. And then a tiny sliver of western Colorado and a little bit of northwest New Mexico. But this is a giant mesa that you'll find our people's footprints all throughout. The scientists and the people outside of our culture refer to these places as ruins. However, we refer to these places as our footsteps. And then right smack dab in the middle, you can see that there is a center point with the big star, and that represents the center of the universe. And to me, that represents where Hopi lies today on the Colorado Plateau. Go ahead and next slide, please. In the Tewa version of how we came into this world, we came into this world from an underworld. And this is true of many Southwestern tribes, Pueblo and non-Pueblo. We have an emergence concept of how we came into this world. Just the same way that we were born into this world physically, so we believe that we were born into this world as a human race. And in the Tewa version of this story, maybe this is more of a non-sacred version of the story, that when we came out, we were blinded by the light, just like Manfred Mann talks about. My father used to say, you can be blinded by the light just the same way that you can be blinded by darkness. But when we came into this world, we were blinded by the bright light of this world. But there we heard a little voice, and the little voice told us to cover our eyes and then uncover them with our hands. And when we did this, we could see light and movement, but very, very vague. Do it again, this little voice said. We did it again, and then we could see blurry shapes. We were told, do it again the 3rd time. And the way I think of it is that maybe we could see the way I can see without my glasses, and then finally do it the last time. And when we did it the last time, kapow, then we could see clearly in this world. And we looked to see who this voice that was speaking to us, and it was this beautiful lady right here, Kokyang Sotwuti in Hopi, which means the spider woman, the spider grandmother. And she became our guide on this earth. Next slide, please. So various Puebloan people have different geographic locations where they believe their emergence took place. I like to point out that, the scientist has their theory about how human life began on this earth. To the scientists, they say that human life began somewhere on the continent of Africa. And then if you're familiar with the Judeo-Christian story, human life is said to begin in the Garden of Eden. However, if you ask people in Hopi, where did we emerge from? Where did human life begin? We'll point to the Grand Canyon. And very near to the confluence of the Colorado River and the Little Colorado, just upstream from the Little Colorado River, is the original kiva that we believe we came into this world from. I always struggled with science when I was in high school. I graduated from the Santa Fe Indian School back in 1988, and science was really a problem for me because they would use these gigantic 5-syllable words to describe things that you can't even see, you know. And they would always stress to us that science is observation, and they'd stress on us the scientific method that you develop a hypothesis and then you test your hypothesis and you document your tests. This is known as the scientific theory. And that's the introduction to science. And then we turn the page in our science book, and then it tells us that the world was created, or the world began with a big bang some billions and billions of years ago. And, you know, for a critically thinking teenager, you know what I mean? I'm thinking, now, wait a minute, you just told me that science was observation. I'm pretty dang sure that none of you were around here to observe this. So I think of this as theory. You know, the scientist has their theory. Many religions have their theory. Our people, we also have our theory about how human life began on this earth. Next slide, please. So in our theory, we emerged from that original kiva. And this is my father's artwork that you're looking at here. And this is from a mural that will be foundational to this presentation. It's a multi-panel mural that is called The Journey of the Human Spirit. But this is the first panel of that particular mural. It was done also, my father, Lomawa Wisa Tahang, as well as Kutsio Gilma, Delbert Chonani Tahang, my brother, grandfather, and they collaborated on this particular piece. But you can see here that at that original womb kiva, in our theory, all people emerged together. All people emerged. The African races, the Caucasian races, as well as Native American people, Oriental people, all races, we came into this world together. And then we went on our migrations throughout this world. Next slide, please, Stephanie. And as I already mentioned, you know, the scientist refers to these places as ruin sites. But to us, these are not ruins, these are living places. We refer to these places as the footsteps of our mothers, the footsteps of our fathers. And you can see here in this particular slide at the top right-hand corner, you can see an aerial view of Chaco Canyon, and then down in the left bottom corner, you also see one of the Chaco outliers. And you can see in the middle, there's this migration line representing that migration that we took from the time that we emerged as we made our way throughout the Colorado Plateau. And all throughout the Colorado Plateau, you'll find our footsteps. And the Colorado Plateau was our learning center. The Colorado Plateau was the place that we as Puebloan people would glean the knowledge that we would need to survive until we came to the places that we are today, the places that were prophesied for us. Okay, next slide. I like to point out that we traveled as clanships. You know, there was no such thing as tribe prehistorically. We didn't have tribes. There was not a Zuni tribe. There was not a Hopi tribe. There was not a Santa Clara Pueblo tribe. But there were clanships. And each one of these clanships has a particular story about their migration. Just like people from Europe came from Europe into America, many of those people adopted a different language. There's many people of German descent, for instance, in America that no longer speak German. They speak English, same way with people that came from Spain or people that came from many different countries. But they can still trace their lineage to a very specific place in their genealogy. And this is also true of our clanships. We migrated as clanships. and then we settled among various people, but we recognized that our clanship still is who we maintain our identity. We're a matrilineal people, so we take our clanship from our mothers. And so my grandfather has a different clanship than my father. My father receives his clanship from his mother, and I receive my clanship from my mother. So my grandfather is Bluebird clan, my father is Snow clan, but I'm of the Badger clan. We're all from different clanships because we take on the clanships of our mothers. But this here in this particular slide is part of the mural at the Desert View Watchtower at the Grand Canyon. And this is showing one of the clanships, the history of one of the clanships. And at the left-hand bottom corner, you can see the young man who is known as Steele, which just basically means boy or young man. And he is taking a very long migration following the course of the Colorado River. And you can see in the next slide that he's in that arc type of structure. And on either side of him are the walls of the Grand Canyon. This is an alternative history of America that I'm presenting. And you've heard in your textbook version of American history that Major Powell was the first guy to go down the Colorado River. But as far as our people are concerned, Major Powell was probably about 1,200 years too late to claim that honor. The first man to go down in our memory was this young man who went down the entire length of the Colorado River. Today, the Colorado River is considered to be our continent's most endangered river. Its waters have been chopped up and bought and sold between states and countries, and it no longer makes its way home out to the Gulf of California, the Sea of Cortez, and on out to the Pacific Ocean. But that back then it did, and this young man went all the way the course of the Colorado River, went inland into Mexico, some say even much further than Mexico, but there he took a bride of the people there from that land, and then they made the long trip back up to Toconavi, to Navajo Mountain. And their descendants today, because this was a new union on the Colorado Plateau, and again, we're matrilineal people, they took their identity from the mother. Their descendants today are known among us as the Snake Clan. Go ahead and next slide. Okay, I always get to this one, and this kind of doesn't seem to fit in this whole scheme that I'm sharing. Well, this is actually a slide representing when we first stepped onto the pages of history. In 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. And within 100 years of Columbus's landing, virtually the entire Native American population of the Caribbean islands was wiped out. They died from disease, they died from warfare, and also historically, they say that Native American people of the Caribbean islands made very poor slaves because when they were faced with that ultimate decision of submitting to slavery, they would rather commit suicide rather than to submit themselves to slavery. So the colors in this particular background of this slide shows the colors of the Jamaican flag. And of course, among many Native American people, we have a strong affinity for certain kinds of music. I grew up a metalhead, and I always attribute that to the fact that on the reservations, part of my language, we're pissed off. We're very angry for what's taken place in our history. But also, reggae music also has a very close relationship to us. And oftentimes people ask me, well, what is it about reggae music? And I tell them, you know, if you think about it, it makes a whole lot of sense. African slaves were brought in to replace the slave population of the Native American people of the Caribbean islands. Now, those people, I should point out, the Taino people, the Arawak people, they still exist, and many of them also exist in the current bloodlines of the Caribbean island people. One of my favorite bands, the Bookman Experience from Haiti, they also, Lolo, the singer, he's also not only of African descent, but also of Native American descent. And so those bloodlines continue in the people today. But this slide is really a tribute to reggae music and our love for reggae music in Hopi. Reggae music is the music of a people that have been oppressed by the greater culture for the last 400 plus years. We kind of relate to that. Reggae music is also rebel music. I'm not talking about the happy Americanized version of reggae. I'm talking about Jamaica reggae, rebel music reggae. It's angry music. It's angry in your face music. And we also relate to that voice of a cry for social justice. But reggae music is also a music that is uncompromisingly, undeniably spiritual. And we also relate to that. So reggae music really is on a parallel track to our own mindset and our own experience. I'm gonna throw in an interlude here. I'd like to play Redemption Song from Bob Marley, and this as a tribute to the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean islands, and also to all that are oppressed in the Americas, both North America, Middle America, and South America, and the Caribbean islands. When you listen to Redemption Song, just focus on what the lyrics are saying here, because Bob Marley is expressing how his people were uprooted from their homeland and were brought to America in that very first verse. Oh, pirate, yes, they were by, sold I to the merchant ships, minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit. But my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We flowered in this generation triumphantly. Won't you hear to sing another song of freedom? Is all I ever had. Redemption song, redemption song. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. I'm not before atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We've got to keep fulfilling the book. Won't you help to sing another song of freedom? Is all I've ever had. Redemption song, redemption song. All I've ever had, all I've ever known. Redemption song, redemption song. It's a song of freedom, songs of freedom, yeah. So our people step onto the pages of history in the year 1539. Yes. So like I said, our people step onto the pages of history, and I'm talking about the nations of the Southwest. We step onto the pages of history in 1539. So think about this again. I want to challenge the textbook history of America because, you know, in the 7th, 8th grade, and even through high school, I would get my history textbook, and it would tell me in 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue, and then you turn the page and it fast forwards 115 years to Jamestown in 1607, and then on to Plymouth in 1621. But that's a very distorted view of what took place as far as the European conquest of America. Columbus was sailing for Spain, and if you think of what was happening in Spain in the 16th century, that was really a full-scale bloody inquisition, and that's exactly what was brought to the shores of America. If you think about it in those terms, it's really no surprise that within 100 years, virtually the majority population of the indigenous people of the Caribbean islands was wiped out. From there, the conquest goes into Mexico, plundering the gold from the tribes of Mexico, then down into South America, plundering the silver, and then the conquest goes into the two southern corners of what today we refer to as the United States. In 1539, St. Augustine was established, 68 years before Jamestown, as the first European settlement in what we currently call the United States. That very same year, 1539, the Coronado expedition came into the Southwest from Mexico and entered the Southwest. And actually, an interesting point, that the first white man that we saw was not a white man in the Southwest. He was a black man, and he wasn't a Christian. He was a Muslim, and this is Estebanico, who was part of a shipwrecked expedition into Florida. He traversed the entire continent, the entire length of the continent from Florida all the way to Mexico City with Cabeza de Vaca, and he claimed to have seen the 7 cities of gold, the fabled 7 cities of Cibola. And so in 1539, Coronado led his expedition in search of those cities and was disappointed, but really we did have the gold, and the gold was in a grain, the sacred grain that has brought us sustenance throughout our existence, and that's the sacred grain of corn. 1598, the Oñate expedition established the second European settlement in the United States, and that's San Gabriel, New Mexico, just about 30 miles north of Santa Fe. Santa Fe is considered to be the oldest continuously used capital city in the United States, being established in 1610. Although neither San Gabriel, New Mexico, nor Santa Fe was actually established in the years attributed to them. Santa Fe says it was established in 1610. No, Santa Fe was built upon a pre-existing Tewa village, Oge Owinge. It was claimed by the Spanish in 1610. Same way with San Gabriel, New Mexico. That was a Tewa village across the river from Oke Owinge, and it was claimed by the Spanish in 1598. But we were under the inquisitional rule of Spain for the next 80 plus years in the Southwest. In 1675, there was a public hanging in Santa Fe of our medicine men. And I like to point out that although Santa Fe today is promoted as a place of cultural exchange, as a place of cultural unity, Santa Fe Plaza in particular is that place of festivals and so forth, place, the tourist attraction where people visit. Santa Fe Plaza was a place of bloodshed. It's a place that our people shed their blood not once, not twice, not 3 times, but over and over and over and over again in its history. And the plaza itself was a place of public execution and hanging of our medicine people. So in 1675, there was such a hanging. Those that were accused of lesser crimes were subject to scourging. And one of those men was a Pueblo man, a Tewa man by the name of Pope. Pope was from Oke Owinge, but he relocated after this incident to the most northern village of Taos, New Mexico. And from there, he organized a revolt, or actually, in our understanding, he received instructions from Poseyemu, from the creator. He received instructions for a revolt, for liberating ourselves from our oppressors. It was illegal for a Native American to own a horse under this Catholic regime. And so runners were sent into all of the Pueblo villages all throughout northern New Mexico and northern Arizona. Every village between Taos and down south to Albuquerque, and even further south to the villages of the Piro and Tampiro that no longer are among us today. And then it went west to the Pueblo of Acoma, then to the state line, Zuni Pueblos, and then across state lines to the villages of Hopi. And these were relay runners. This is about a 500-mile jog. And these runners carried knotted cords and gave instructions to the war chiefs of each village to untie a knot at the dawning of each day. And simultaneously, throughout the summer of 1680, these knots were being untied by Puebloan war chiefs. And when the last knot was untied, right around August 10th of 1680, all of our people simultaneously went to war against our oppressors. This war lasted a little over a week, and the greater culture refers to July the 4th of 1776 as their Independence Day. But to us, our Independence Day took place 100 years before the American Revolution, before there was even a Washington, D.C. or a United States of America in existence. We fought with Spain, and I say this with all humility, that we're the only group of Native American people in all of written history to actually oust and establish European colony from our homeland. And this took place in August of 1680. Next slide, please. This is a painting from my grandfather that actually hangs in the Palace of the Governors on Santa Fe Plaza. I don't know if you can see in the right-hand corner that there is my grandfather's signature, and there is also the date that he painted this or completed this work, and that was in the year 1976. He was approached by somebody to create a piece that would honor the bicentennial birthday of America. And this was the piece that my grandfather created for the bicentennial birthday. And my grandfather went 100 years before to our revolution. This is actually the destruction of the church in Songopave, Hisat Songopave, there below Second Mesa in Hopi. My father's people, my grandfather's people. And you can see that the priests were particular targets in the Pueblo Revolt. They were not really given any quarter. No quarter was given to the missionaries because of their abuses towards our women and the abuses towards our children. Next slide, please. The Spanish came back in 1692, 12 years later, and reestablished control over New Mexico, reestablished control in Santa Fe, and they attempted to reestablish control in Hopi. As a matter of fact, in the year 1700, the largest, probably the largest Spanish mission was located in Hopi, and that was at the village of Owatobi. But in that year, 1700, men from some of the other villages, Sumopavi excluded, but men from the other villages in Hopi, warriors came and destroyed, totally obliterated the village of Owatobi, even killing our own people. And this is why my father represents all of these figures with gray faces, representing that we've all been made sick from this European domination of the Americas. And so this is a scene that took place in 1700. And basically for northern Arizona, even though Spain claimed to have control over northern Arizona, even though that titleship passed on to Mexico and then finally to the United States, really there was no significant European presence in northern Arizona for the next 200 years. Next slide, please. This slide is representing that 200-year period when our people went back to a traditional way of life. And you can see that my father has the Buddha next to Ahula, the Katina priest. And what that's representing is a philosophy that is common to Hopi as well as Buddhism, that life is suffering. A life of virtue is a life of suffering. If you've ever come to Hopi, you'll recognize that we don't have running waters there. The way that we live, we have been 100% dependent upon our answers to our prayers for rain for the last 1,000 years. There's no running waters there. The inheritance that our fathers give to us is not an inheritance of land or stores or abundance, but rather it's an inheritance of suffering, of cold, of heat, of hunger, of thirst, because our fathers recognize that this is what makes us an enduring people. By living in harmony with the cycles of the sun, the moon, the rains, the clouds, the stars, by living in this type of harmony with the world around us, this is what would make us a sustaining culture. Next slide, please. This slide is a tribute to the first peaceful protest in United States history, of what I consider the first peaceful protest. And let me give some background for this. So the Pueblo Revolt that I've just spoken of and all of that time period up to 1700, again, this is before there was even a Washington, D.C. or a United States in existence. Now we can fill in the blanks with the textbook history of America, the English version of America. Andrew Jackson's pushing out the civilized tribes from the east, pushing them out into Oklahoma. The many, many wars of the eastern tribes with the United States government, and previously with England and with France. And then we're familiar with the American push to the west, this concept of manifest destiny, America believing that they have a right to take over, quote unquote, the heathen nations that occupy the Americas. And you're familiar with the Plains Wars, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the execution of Crazy Horse, my hero, my personal hero, and Sitting Bull. And I'll come back to that in a second, but also the imprisonment of the Navajo in an early concentration camp in Bosque Redondo. Between 1864 and 1868, the Navajo were rounded up by Kit Carson and were imprisoned in Bosque Redondo, where 2,000 of the people perished. And after 4 years of imprisonment there, and after the catastrophe of so many dying from disease there, then they were allowed to return home in 1868. But this is showing the close of the Indian Wars in following the Battle of the Little Bighorn and all the tribes being subjugated to reservations on the plains. Sitting Bull invited the ghost dance out to Standing Rock. I should just make note that right now I recognize that I'm over time as far as the 45-minute goal, but I think it's more important to just continue at the pace that we're going through this presentation. So just heads up, everybody. But this is a tribute to Sitting Bull's invitation to the ghost dance to Standing Rock. The ghost dance was a ceremony that started in Nevada by the medicine man Wovoka, who received a vision and also established a ceremony that outsiders referred to as the ghost dance, because this was a ceremony that gave honor to those that had died in the wars and in the disease that has ravaged our people over the past 300, 400, 500 years. And so Sitting Bull invited this ceremony out to Standing Rock in 1890. Now, I call this the first peaceful protest in United States history because to be a participant in the ghost dance, the participants had to make a pledge that they would not touch alcohol and also that they would abstain from initiating warfare. And so basically this was a pacifist movement, and the population of Standing Rock swelled. The government agent panicked by the explosion of the population, and soldiers were brought in, surrounded the camp. Actually sounds very familiar to what recently took place in Standing Rock at another peaceful protest. And soldiers came in, arrested Sitting Bull, simultaneously murdered Sitting Bull, shot him in the head, and then the community was thrown into a panic, and many of the people fled into the plains, the open plains, in blizzard-like conditions, and they were pursued by the soldiers. They were eventually the soldiers caught up with them, surrounded the camp, and this was at Wounded Knee Creek, and this is known as the Battle of Wounded Knee. It should be called a massacre, the Massacre of Wounded Knee. Actually, it is, for the most part, I think, today. But soldiers disarmed the camp and then fired upon the camp with repeating rifles, and about 350 people were killed and buried in a mass grave there at Wounded Knee. The 47 survivors were herded into a church in the community of Wounded Knee, and there they were assigned a Civil War physician, and that's who you can see at the right hand of this screen. And this is a Civil War physician. The Civil War is known in American history as one of the goriest, bloodiest hand-to-hand conflicts in history. Much of it was fought at point-blank range, hand-to-hand fighting. And so this is a surgeon. He's seen basically everything there is to see. But he says, he's quoted as saying, "This is the first time I've ever seen women and children shot to pieces, and I can't stand the sight of it." There's a little girl on the bottom of the screen who's drinking water, and her dress is bloodstained, because this is also from the accounts of what took place there in that little church, that this girl was motioning for water. When they gave her water, it came out of her throat because she had been shot through the throat. Ironically, this took place on December the 27th of 1890. So there was still the Christmas greenery decorating the church, and in the back of the church, the banner that read, "Peace on earth, goodwill to men." Next slide. So I mentioned that we are first contact people in what we call the United States, the peoples of the Southwest, the Puebloan people, and particularly Hopi. So we're also last contact people. After the subjugation of all the other tribes, we were still the wild, wild West in John Wayne terms. This picture is a picture of something that took place in 1895. We were commanded that we should send our children to boarding school thousands of miles away to the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. And when our leaders refused to give up the children, they were imprisoned on Alcatraz Island. This is a picture from Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Next slide, please. When our leaders returned, they were still not willing to cooperate with the government. So there was a second arrest that took place in 1906. And in that 1906 arrest, if you count on the standing row from the right, the fifth man from the right, standing in between two taller men, that's my great-grandfather, Lolo Matyama, from the Sun Clan of Sowopave, and he was arrested and imprisoned for refusing to send my grandfather to school. Down below, seated, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it looks like, from what I can tell in this slide, is Louis Tawanitma, who was recruited by the United States Olympic team after he was sent to Carlisle Indian School. The young men were sent to Carlisle, the young men of this prison, regardless of whether they were married or not. The older men, like my grandfather, my great-grandfather, were sent to prison. But while Louis Tawanitma was in Carlisle, he was recruited for the United States Olympic team. In 1912, he set a United States record in a long distance run, which continued to stand until it was broken by another Native American, Billy Mills from South Dakota, about 4 decades later. Next slide, please. So I want to point out that the seizing of children from their families, the seizing of fathers from their children, mothers from their children, sending them to boarding school thousands of miles away, in a boarding school whose stated policy was kill the Indian, save the man. In other words, kill the culture within us, kill the language within us, kill what we are as traditional people, and instill in us Christian capitalistic values that would be our salvation. Kill the Indian, save the man. This was taking place all over Indian country, all throughout North America, where our cultures were being assaulted directly by this boarding school policy. And this didn't just happen for one generation, but multi-generations. My father was sent to Lawrence, Kansas for boarding school. I personally graduated from the same boarding school as my grandfather. And though the policies of these schools has changed, for instance, in New Mexico, the Santa Fe Indian School that I graduated from is now operated by the Governor's Council of the Puebloan tribes, yet still we carry the scars of generational traumas, multi-generational traumas that we've carried. My grandfather says that when he graduated from the Santa Fe Indian School with what was supposed to be an 8th grade education, the people still couldn't put sentences together in English. So this was really not an 8th grade education. This was more, in his estimation, like a 2nd grade education. And it's in the midst of this calculated attack on our families, on our culture, that we are forced to usurp our traditional governments that we have had for thousands of years and to adopt a constitutional government in the image of the United States in a language that we don't understand. So we were appointed and hired lawyers to represent us. In 1921, the Navajo Nation, on their website, it states that they were established as a constitutional government so that oil companies would have one entity to negotiate with as they explored those lands for resources. In the case of Hopi, we were assigned a lawyer, hired a lawyer, John Boyden from Salt Lake City. When he died, it was discovered that he was moonlighting for the Peabody Coal Company that he was supposed to be negotiating with and representing the Hopi tribe. Actually, he was playing both sides of the table. And in those initial negotiations, Hopi was paid 3.3% for the market value of coal on Black Mesa, which is the world's largest strip mining. I'm gonna say that again, the world's largest strip mining operation on the joint use lands of Navajo and Hopi. We were paid 3.3% for the market value of coal and given $1.67 for every 326,000 gallons of water. Every acre foot of water, we were paid $1.67. 45 billion gallons of water were siphoned from underneath our feet between 1970 until the coal slurry was shut down in 2005. 45 billions of gallons of water, which would, in theory, take care of our people with a pristine water source for the next 200 to 300 years. It was gone overnight. It's never coming back. And this was so that they mixed the coal with the water to slurry the coal via another black pipeline, black snake pipeline, all the way out to the Mojave generating station in Nevada, so that electricity could be generated for the large cities of the Southwest, unsustainable cities throughout Arizona, Salt Lake City, the Imperial Valley of California, and even the excesses of the Las Vegas Strip. During the years of 1970 to 2005, the majority of our people still didn't have running water or electricity in their homes. And even today, many people in Hopi don't have running water or electricity in their homes. And if you do have running water in Hopi, it's contaminated with arsenic, which they say is somewhat a natural occurrence, but also it is multiplied by irresponsible mining practices. On Navajo, you may have recently heard on the national news that 40% of the Navajo Nation today still doesn't have running water or electricity in their homes. And so this is the outcome of this kill the Indian, save the man policy that we lived in. And our people have been under the direct assault for the last 100 years, 100 plus years through that educational system. Okay, I'm gonna try to wrap this up. So let's go on, let's advance a couple of slides forward, Stephanie. Okay, this is, yes, thank you. So this is a tribute piece that I did for my father when my father passed away in 2009. I was born in 1970 at the beginning of the coal slurry. So really throughout my life, this has been the situation out in Hopi. But this is a tribute piece that I did for my father, and this is showing the path of the ceremonial clown in ceremonies. And of course, I put the Tewa clown because my mother is Tewa, so I'm Tewa. But if you start at the baby and then follow the path of the ladder coming out from the womb kiva, and then go clockwise around this drawing, you'll see that it is representing 9 stages of life, what my father referred to as the Hopi 12 steps, from conception to birth to discovery, meaning an interaction with the spiritual, to our ego at the bottom right-hand corner, the center 6 o'clock, representing our conscience, the owl representing that aspect of deity that's all seeing, and the raven representing that aspect of deity that can clean us up. Our conscience speaks to us in our egotistical relationship that we have in the world as we're growing up, but we're warned to listen, but we don't. So the clown, you see the clown at the bottom left-hand corner in dysfunction and continuing in dysfunction until 9 o'clock. He gets the royal beatdown, his destruction, which leads finally to his restoration at 11 o'clock. And then finally, the sun representing balance, representing that he has finally become Hopi. The mural that we've been reviewing of my father's, that has been interspersed with artwork from my grandfather and myself, is called The Journey of the Human Spirit. And it is telling the story of our people, and actually even more specifically, his own people, his own Snow Clan people, water family. It's showing that story from emergence into this world, our interactions with this world, our discoveries in this world, our dysfunctions in this world, both those that were imposed on us and those that we've self-inflicted ourselves with. And then finally, if we had taken the time to review our restoration, our prophesied restoration. But that story is not only a story of the Puebloan people. That story is also the story of every civilization in this world. It's the same journey. And that story is also not only the story of nations and civilizations and cultures, but also for us as individuals. Our conception, our birth, our discovery, our walk through this world, our dysfunctions in this world, and that place of chastisement, that place of destruction that hopefully leads us to a place of humility where we finally come full circle and become converted and become, to use the Hopi word, we finally become Hopi. The word Hopi is used in the greater culture to refer to a language, the Hopi language, or to refer to a people, the Hopi people, or to refer to geography, Hopi reservation. And we use it in those very same ways as well, but the most common way that the word Hopi is used in our culture is used to describe a state of being in balance with the cycles of the sun, the cycles of the moon, the cycles of the rain, being in balance with our Creator and with our fellow man. When we've attained that, then we've truly become Hopi. And this is really the life goal that we have. So to conclude this presentation, I just want to say that this is a universal journey. This is our journey throughout this land. This is also our individual journey. And I hope that in your life, you can recognize that you're also on a similar journey. And maybe that you also will come to a place of healing and restoration in your life. Come to that place of being in the state of being Hopi in your life. Hopi land, if I forget you, fire not gonna come from me tongue. Hopi land, if I forget you, let my right hand forget what it's supposed to do. And in the ancient day during a migration way, following the sign that Jah provide with no delay, we've been traveling from a place to place, seeking understanding by what the Spirit say. 10,000 years in the land of the free, and they want me to give up my right to property. Don't you see? It never belonged to you and me. We were given permission if we live in harmony. Hopi land, if I forget you, fire not gonna come from me tongue. Hopi land, if I forget you, let my right hand forget what it's supposed to do. The Castellum come in 1540, years gone by, about 60, when we were burned in the oven in the 17th century. And them tried to conquer, but them can't conquer me. I would not lie down, I would not fall asleep. I remember how they held our fathers in captivity, took the children, erased their memory, changed their names and their identity. Remember who you are and your people's history, how we came into this land to live in humility. No more exploitation for filthy money. We all know that's not the way to be. Hopi land, if I forget you, fire not gonna come from me tongue. Hopi land, if I forget you, let my right hand forget what it's supposed to do. Caught up in these ways and the world's gone crazy. Don't you know it's just a phase? Case of the Simon says, if I neglect the truth, then my word won't penetrate. Babylon burning to the place, can't see through the haze. Chop down all of their dirty ways. That's the price that you pay for selling lies to the youth. No way, not okay. Oh, no way, not okay. Now, in down. What no, I got to keep on moving, stay alive, stay alive. We gonna stay alive. Tewa-Hopi, si chomoe, Wopi polaka, musang nabe, si palave, sumopabe, que kotsmobe, o shaibe, bakabe, hotbela, mankabe. Down in the village, yeah. Down, 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 down in the village. Hopi land if I forget you. Fire not gonna come from in town. Hopi land if I forget you. Let my right hand forget what it's supposed to do. Hopi land if I forget you. Fire not gonna come from me tongue. Hopi land if I forget you. If one love could lead the way and one light could guide our way, with one heart we carry on, with one voice, one song. If one love could lead the way and one light could guide our way, with one heart we carry on, with one voice, one song. One day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. Kunawaha navikemaing. Thank you guys so much for listening. Everybody go with blessings.